I've been discussing it, and Tim discussed some to critical extents why the golden rule, and what I've also as opposed in contrast to what I've been told is the Rabbi Hillel um, source in the Abrahamics, and then found earlier in the Confucian Analects, where his statement is that which is detestable to you, do not do to others. And the golden rule is described as do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, it does describe an action before do. Well, actually, not necessarily. It could be do speak. Do unto others or treat others as you would have them treat you. So then, yeah, however, like I discussed earlier, it can result, and this can be in some bad case scenarios, in you actually asking, not asking, and not finding answers to questions from a person. So in my case, they will all make it known because they can't discuss a conflict of any kind between any two persons, or watch them get into an argument between one another or any two persons without, or any things of this kind, or yelling at a patient, or arguing that a Schedule 2 or 3 product-based request is wrong. And any argument or conflict around me, then it becomes immediately clear what's known by management about me and what they're constantly thinking about me. Now, how do you eliminate what they constantly think about you? In my case, and that is, see, but they'll take the very same thing and say, well, out of respect and sensitivity, we don't talk about it with you. But you see, actually, well, on the other hand, if that will then mean, and it should, even by any calculations they make, that what they would consider their care efforts, I have to then know the strength and be able to draw enough power, and hold and cling to enough utilitarian wisdom to know that they're trying to, within their means, care for me without any direct question-based discussions with me about my kindergarten year. Now, so because of this, and because they are a pharmacy and don't have psychiatrist qualifications, the owner even, I'm quite certainly convinced, and he's admitted, but then try to represent certain other times that this admittance could be an additional test of some kind, is that he has no license with the military, and in accordance with the Constitution of this country, then free consent would need to be negotiated and established between myself and the party doing that which Roger Tor does, what he calls a Pufta party. So you see, so I've had, it is very strange because I will be considering, and it's a constant feeling of them cutting me away from the experience of the years with my step family, which were tremendously the beginnings of a recovery, a chance to learn about art, celebrate more art and music. I had they were such impressive people. I feel I owe so much of the best aspects of my life to them. But when the concern is conflicts that we want to say are psychiatric and at the same time scientific, we have to say have something to do with your genetics, which mean that personality disorders, which they will then say are to do with bad genes. They'll just use the pejorative term genes, bad genes. Means that in terms of conversations, there are ongoing and perennial research in Inquisition-based checks made on you as a member of staff, which you don't understand or know how to distinguish between being subjected to a research-based or experimental social scientific scenario, but yet you've not been asked, do you freely give consent to be in one? You know that you were given a job, so you're an employee. And so yeah, I mean, this is, take care of you, punk, is a line someone may use before shooting a gun at you. I'd really like to take care of you. And people, there's been situations where people have gone, well, what if we, yes, admittingly break the Privacy Act in this respect, but to approach him and then introduce him to this line of conversation beginning with statements on our behalf and with no leading questions to at least make it seem less obvious to me that a Privacy Act violation of this such and such a matter had to have occurred by such and such a person or persons. They essentially train you up in a whole lot of this, but and while telling you there is such a thing as professional business privilege information which you are to protect, but yet they haven't defined the scope of it in any conversation on any paper, and you do not get given an employee contract to sign until July of 2009, under which for which time beforehand you've been told that you're on a trial basis in which you have to prove to them that you meet their requirements, also of which aren't discussed, with the exception of one managing pharmacist who would discuss such in relation to the pharmacist code of ethics, and then I would discuss with him my particular interest in the study of the subsection of the National Dispensary Technicians Training course that focused on the scope and limitations of a dispensary technician. Yeah, and so I had explained to them, and this was even that was I'm not sure if this shouldn't in principle affect a professional environment, but you've introduced yourselves as Freemasons. I'll say to you here, I am an atheist, a non-theist. I do not believe. Even during quiet moments in the store, I'd look up atheism quotations and study them. So, you know, otherwise, yeah. So you're taught things like if you're for or against, but I just explained that doesn't work with the traffic light. Or say something to you like, "What's the color of a kangaroo?" I've never seen one before myself. Is a kangaroo's fur blue or yellow? And you go, it's grey. And I said, no, a blue. I said, is it blue or yellow? Um, and they go, no, neither. I'm trying to say it's not it's not yellow. Oh, so you want me to imply? You want it to be implied to me that it's therefore blue? And you're concealing that it's blue for some reason. No. I'm saying it's grey. You're telling me that to your answer, to your question, there are only two answers. This is now what the name for this is: a false dichotomy. So wrong questions and finding how they come about to be. A lot of it has to do with this Gospel of Mark phenomenon of problems where Jesus is asked, "Are you the King of the Jews?" And his reply is, "Well, you said it." It's literally incorrect, if that's the case. "Well, you said it" could mean I have not understood your question. I felt your question were a statement or an order. Anyone who's worked in a shop knows this. Like, "Luke, can you serve this medicine to patient such and such?" No. If I was to turn to him in front of the patient's view and say no, well, you know that it's a formality, that you're being technically asked a question, but you know that it's an instruction, so it's not a question. Now, so that should therefore make you all the more sensitive to understanding this Markian problem. Is that, well, Jesus didn't take. We don't know that Jesus. Well, he didn't say yes, I am. He said, "Well, you said it," not "Well, you asked me." So that could be a proof he didn't comprehend the question. Then you have him saying, then you don't have him saying, "No, I'm not," or "Yes, I am." So it does not register to my mind as a confession. So this was political mistreatment. At the time of attrition, political attrition, and you know, as I tried to say, at heart, people believing that the truth about the history of our creation by the gods was that God's even using the Big Bang now, and God's even creating with the evolutionary process. These are his paint palettes, you know. How many times can you think of an example where an answer to a question once historically could only be provided from a religious agency, but yet for now we have scientific answers available that are superior? And how many times has the reverse been the case? how many times has religion come forth and claimed this, and this will happen, and then science, particularly I'd say of such caliber as the National Academy of Sciences, amongst whom I think 93-97% are self-professed agnostics. So what it meant for me was, yeah, my work environment had to be somewhere that I thought it unfair and discrimination that they would even believe in concepts of psychiatry when judging you and being ambiguous about the judgments they're pronouncing, and non-discursive, not including you in a discussion about yourself. Yet you're not. You can't, if you're to trust their word, being professionally, you're not being involved in a study or experiment because they haven't asked for you to give your consent freely. But yet you're a member of staff working for them, so surely they should in fact have you insured in some way against these types of studies and make sure they've ruled out any possible circumstance occurring whereby they would involve by mistake a member of their staff into a research situation. Unless, yeah, the person doing the researching has to have direct, and is in the former employer in my case, has to have direct petition from me saying, I really need your help to, do your thing, over which I was partly informed, and over which he had Doppelhurst misinterpreted to the point where he thought that I was believing in the killing of everybody, for instance. I don't believe. Manson sings online, the death of a million is just a statistic, and the death of one is a tragedy. Religious people think about that, and I asked the Catholic Church about where they stand on George Bush's 9 Childs Behind Left initiatives. So I'm saying, in the event staff are dealing with sick people, how are their rights professionally being defended at all? Granted, we may catch the occasional flu or sniffles or runny nose from, or even a case of tinea or something, sort of itchiness from in your toes from serving customer service, but I'm talking about principal rights. But if you're a private sector business and your ideals, you're not hearing the mission statements or its connotations being ideologically reaffirmed in conversations to you or about your employer. You're getting ambiguous bits and pieces here and there. And you are not being told you are being discriminated against religiously, but the Freemason religion's secret. So that is quite a dilemma, and it's one where I thought they could not be so It turns out, though, they believe. See, the I-1 downloadable suicide stanza section of Doppelhurst. It refers to, for me on a personal level, the phenomenology of various forms of judgments, misjudgments. So yeah, if you are operating in this, working in the conditions of a verbal contractual agreement, the terms of which haven't been stipulated or defined beyond prove yourself to our well enough convinced, and we'll offer you to sign an employee agreement, contractual agreement. Now, I wound up learning that the reason that it took 9 years of employment before they made this offer to me was because the newspaper article discussing my kindergarten year had already been inquired into by the owners of the chemist. But see, that's why they had this consideration. It's, well, we should, plus they believe in a God, while thinking they're uniting all the world's religions. So a heavenly Father, a Father who doesn't exist. And I have a book coming out that's going to discuss why, and in particular I have a soft spot for empathy for people who are coming from broken homes, yet determined to, try to contest what gets called the victim mentality, and wants to challenge themselves and try and find a way to transform defeat into a personal victory. So what was being concealed from me for 9 years were judgments that were being discussed and made in direct relation to my person by the two owners of the chemist, while information about them on a professional level were to be kept a secret by me. Yet I wasn't to know what the nature or source of the and even as Rogers tried to call me out on certain things, I go, well, wasn't your father and mother to tell you or teach you about? And I'm like, huh? You obviously have not thought or done that much thinking, or you'll see, no, that could not have been possible. Because well, I just believe that I was acting in your best interest. It's yeah. So then, faith-based belief is assumptions about such matters as that of the saving of the entire world from something and to something, and taken how and why these beliefs are upheld inseparable from assumptions. So you're to assume, which is have no proofs, or even a priori or a posteriori knowledge or information or concepts, as your basis for saving the entire world. So it can lead to so much horror, but see where they're tugging at the heartstrings, and I think they're quite knowing that, is that can't you understand? We're doing this because of a genuine care for your welfare. Well, by merit of the way I understand you to have misinterpreted Doppelhers, which you people took a psychological interest in. I did not. It's art. It's potent philosophical art, and it's amazing. As I have always said and will stand by, Yeah. One thing being said was that I'd lying about my beliefs. The line, each time someone believes what I say, I become a lie. It's a clear meaning for question. To me, it indicated question me. And when you read Manson quotes saying art is a question mark, it should not be an answer. There's a minus drinking hemlock Socratic genius there, because he's truly not telling anyone what to even think. The right to movement, an appreciation of the right to movement, has been extended to the neural pathways and their content. How people are choosing to express their opinions, their arguments, to converse, to discuss and debate, and yeah. So you can't quite go from art as a question mark and not an answer. So but at the same time, they were never. So, and when these Freemasons, and you'll know it's secrecy. That's right. That's the point I missed before. It's got to be more truth to the secrecy claims that you see, sort of John Safran in John Safran vs. God. Go to investigate, only to find them playing lawn bowls. As he goes, no, I'm not interested in telling you even more. Well, if they're Luciferian, see, it is impossible. You cannot unite even. I mean, there's over 30,000 denominations or sects of Christianity, and they all came from going, well, how do we? What is the proper understanding of Christianity? So if you have Freemasonry saying we've united implying we've united all the world's religions, you're supposed to go, oh, when it's really it's an absolute affirmation of this secrecy thing, while sort of slipping up. If that they're divisive in their thinking. But if their beliefs concern population culling, it also means things like they would run a checking process on you if you were religious, or they thought you would think you were to have beliefs, to try and make sure that their Freemasonic religion has room for some appreciation of you, which they'll tell you as you're their employee on a non-contractual basis, by which you've been verbally told to prove yourselves to them. So what I had to know was, well, how do I know I'm working in a pharmacy and not being attempted to be converted to a religion that's would then be a problem even for my employers, because in their own mind their religion is to be a secret, and I'm to respect it by not understanding that unless invited to be a member or requested to suss out or check out a service, I would decline, saying, no, I'm not interested. But yeah, well, how would I know that I was being taught more? How was I know that I was working in a pharmacy on a non-contractual documentary basis in relationship between me and the two co-founders? As opposed and not being lined up for some sort of psychiatric imposed melodrama, due to the religious beliefs of the two co-founders, which, as they told me, they were Freemasons. They may or may not have been sure that I had deconverted and reported myself to be an Okay, now possibly yeah, I will elaborate on another aspect of Doppelhers I speak in defense of, which so I do believe in art, but the way a religious person hears that means then the characters you may measure or examine in some way as beings giving me prescriptive moral imperatives and prescriptive teachings of a worldview that you could sell. But you don't get to read what this worldview is that he's reporting on from having studied he thought that women in bondage, two women in bondage bound together, I would be comprehending eating. Now it's this short film has a lot to do with the bisexual rights movement, and I was so amazed by it because I was actually becoming. I thought about questioned what I would take for granted, and it led me to realize that David Bowie's mysterious character in the Labyrinth. It's one of the first, I think, the first appearance of David Bowie that I ever saw, being an 80s child, and so but I sensed his character to have been have had this coolness about him, and this helping the girl find the baby. It's fair enough to say that, well, this person taught me how to love. See, religious people can also have faith that if your childhood arguably began in tragedy, or your means to gauge what a tragedy is, or be able to express what a problem is, or know how to verbally annotate to your own states of pain and the degree to which you feel pain, because there was one instance where, as a young child, I remember my mother taking me to hospital for in the right ear, middle ear, particularly in the right ear. There was a tremendous amount of pain associated to that time too. It's only one time that such a thing happened, though. So I would stop and think about. I couldn't avoid. It wasn't that I was so much coming to the conclusion, as that I was saying, well, even the units of within fields like psychology or psychiatry that you're referring to in discussions, even if they're taken into consideration, all your religion and the Freemasons are saying Jesus was a martyr who laid down his own life, and then they sometimes try to describe martyrs in what they consider to be them showing them empathy and a courtesy, doing them a kindness. So to question them at this point and call that discrimination would have them going, "Oh, what the fuck? You're using us, you fucking, you fucking using cunt." But what they have not considered is that, as I have said, that they did not consider those who killed Jesus did not consider that they wouldn't have known how to tell the difference between someone driven into a quiet, silent, suicidal frame of mind, while carrying the cross up the hill, so that this person was a sacrifice being made to the gods or God. I think gets ruled out by what had to have gone on for them to put the loincloth on him. Now, Yeah, so what I absolutely hate is, you know, they're actually going against also that they would want me to believe in their profession and its associate bodies or um, associate agencies, the relationship and standing I was told that Roger still had with the Australian Federal Police, which, if such statements were true, would have absolutely meant that I understood he and I could have a discussion about what's what. So in this newspaper article, it mentions, and this, because I was instructed by my grandfather, inspired at the same time to work on the problem of protecting my mother and sister um, from kindergarten onwards. That we're not without our scuffles, well, which I take responsibility for, and um, was the offender towards my sister for. These were sibling rivalries. They and it's up to her if whether she forgives me or not. But the duty, with the exception of those, I've upheld the duty, and I would not register complaints in states of distress to my mother either, particularly because she was scared of me easily, even on the basis of who I might grow up to be. But where I learned a lot of damage was done is this article in the newspaper and how everybody was reading it. Because while it did celebrate aspects of the heroism and in selflessness, in the on the mind of my stepfather, the man who went on to become my stepfather. The as I say, commensurate to my mother's will and requirements, of course, and knowledge. Is that those who believe in these dynamical interplays between a father and a son will read that article's content. It's why I think the web links have removed it. But the heading, you could just Google from the google.au for Canberra for Australia. The article "Frenzied Attack on Wife Alleged." And it's the story of my kindergarten year. Now, I'd been pulled out of kindergarten months before this happened and sent to Sydney. And I was in Sydney prior to, during, and after the event. So, yeah, and there was no admiration. I could feel the attrition of being told to admire that this was part of God's plan for my life in church. That my mother had apparently wronged my father. She had apparently wronged my father to the point that I think have been put to death during the status of women during a marriage for which they haven't ended in a divorce prior to starting up anything else. It's so it's trying to watch how recuperating. So yeah, well, it was it was implied, if not directly stated, that and that at least were they unwilling to discuss or enter into debate about specifics. That's why there are certain Christians I knew that I admire more than others, as there are still some remaining pharmacists. And it's not because they tell me what they want to hear. I like to be told often what I don't want to hear. I'm talking this is when I talk about in discussion of philosophical ideals, values. I'm being concealed about. Though this is nothing new too, because I was. Well, at the workplace under the non-verbal contractual agreement, there were things I was asked to keep confidential, but I was not to know what those things were or amounted to, while they were trying to, and I couldn't tell, suggest that Doppelherz was having a psychologically detrimental impact on me, or that they were trying to use it as a way to suggest ideas to me that would help me understand why to be on the winning side of Big Pharma and against its any contesting agency. So but yeah, the I want downloadable suicide version, I don't point no. It means I don't know what you think of me, how you came to think what you think of me. Was it by reading or looking up this newspaper article, or was not? Was it by my closest, most trusted male friend trusting you all behind my back with statements that he has made about genetics and cause of motives for criminal acts. So there truly is something to, without the father figure around, how do you know who's bullshitting you, who taught you? So to some extent, I do feel sorry for the ones that, people would call criminals. But where I've been challenged is the question of, can you introduce them to a puzzle that will appeal to their interests in their message to the world. Be less as less like a debate as possible, but and therefore kindly petition questioning and thinking on in terms of independence and self-responsibility. So, yeah, both visually on the basis of portraits of him and this taking for granted the contents of the Gospel of Mark. See, what unbelievers don't do, and we know this because of Enlightenment principles like the suspension of judgment. So if you're asking me what's the color of a kangaroo's fur, is it blue or green? Which one is it? Stop messing me around. Stop fucking with me here. It's got to be one or the other. Which one is it? Just tell me which one it is. That's all I wanted to know, man. Why is that such a hard question? Why is one color answer to one question so hard for you? You know, whose side are you on here? And that's the sort of talk you get from people, and it's a principle to them. It's an epistemological principle, and a metaphysical principle too at the same time. And I said principle logical. Yeah, so I'm goddamn tired as fuck about this, because so it's a poem saying, you know, I want downloadable suicide. I don't really. Version I don't point, no version I point the gun at me. I would think and point the knife at me, point oh. No, I'd imagine grabbing it out of my father's hand and preventing my mother's scarring and wounds by pointing it at myself and considering it my exit point from Christian teachings, while saying, well, to some extent your metaphysics has surprised me, but the person of Jesus, I would argue, it's a bit like, yeah, you could say he was the first celebrity, because he, you know, skeptics aren't even really asking the question, why is it that all these myths were made, transposed onto the Jesus Christ narratives as miraculous feats performed by his person, yet at this moment I lost my train of thought. No, it didn't. See if I get my train of thought back. Yeah, so you bad representation in a press report essentially is what that means. I want downloadable suicide. It's how you go off feeling after people have used this as a basis for judgment. And if they have religious beliefs about a heavenly father and a son, I assumed I was in the same house. But from my point of view, what I had been stood over an authority told about genetics and causality meant that they were teaching me that I would kill without knowing I was killing any number of people, while not knowing I'd killed any of them because of my genes. And also, I didn't figure I could be getting hustled while in the operating in the capacity of a shift work store clerk either. So, you know, you got a lot of people pointing out the faults in Christianity, but there's the contest between Freemasonry and Christianity is, was Jesus a savior or Jesus a martyr? And Freemasonry is convinced they'll beat Christianity at that debate. But their church teachings, I don't think, can have deviated that far from the 16th century where they where they originated. And I'm convinced that their patron saint is Lucifer, who they think probably fell from heaven because of God's stupidity, and they like him. How many Freemason churches have you counted on street ground? I mean, just think of the converse of John 3:16 as if it were prescriptive. Jesus is your savior and you are to follow him. And the sin that he is saving you from was going with the unlawful act of a woman eating an apple, tempted by a snake in see, I'm even open because when you hear criminals, drug dealers talk about decency, don't cross me and I don't cross you. They are, and we see their knowledge of who their affiliates are. It very much leaves even Foxtel. I think that Rupert Murdoch's move to America to take over Fox News is also so that he can start encountering perhaps content available on Foxtel as well, to some extent. A theory has been posed well before my birth in 1976 in a film called Network. But basically, yeah, the same means by which Roger told me he could use to electroshock someone. The intensities are variable. So, based on the intensity he uses. Also, people tend to pander to the fallacy because of their religious worship of the police state and generally Christian monotheism, to asking or wondering in relation to a person they're seeing, dating, a friend with, an acquaintance with, an associate with. The question, what is the deal with you? It's again a singular phrased question. I'll even talk about epistemology to a degree and breathe out 3 knowledge types: knowledge by acquaintance, propositional knowledge, and knowledge by experience. You may ask somebody to ask, how do you convert one person's knowledge by experience into propositional knowledge? Yes, in my conclusions philosophically, I reached and was encouraged, see right before of his eyes and his surveillance efforts, Roger would, and the fact that I caught a shoplifter from his chemist to get the job. And I know that I did because he had Gary Cans and Cassandra soon thereafter welcome me into the franchise by posing towards one another, holding rings out, fingers out as if they were wearing rings. Gary asked, are you interested? Now, whatever that had to do with, it was to do with the is to do with the marshalling of the owner, which is Roger Toll. He's the most driven of the Gary's capable of taking things a bit lighter. Even though he'll say things like, I do my best work in the dark, Roger's more ambiguous, misleading, violating of discrimination acts. And see, so yeah, if you're in what's potentially a criminal trust and there's a decency code, you go, well, so what? Crossing you, because I can get it, like being provided with illegal drugs, maybe of greater health benefit, and have indeed in the past, in the years that I was working, right to the point that pharmacists, whose names I will protect, agreed with me completely and wholeheartedly that illicit drug use would leave no record, never amount to me getting called an addict, giving me control over my own usage, making exercise fun. For me, that's because I typically walk fast anyway, because I'm more or less always thinking about getting away from everyone or wanting to. So you'll instead have a man like Roger say, well, that's a sign of a youthful youth and vitality, but this is like Jesus walking off his cross again. Yeah, so the same technology he could use without them knowing it to stimulate the serotonin and dopamine, and whatever else the other known chemical neurals are for the pharmacist's own wives' sexual arousal prior to an act of intercourse in the master bedroom. See, and all he needs is this belief that the Freemasonry knows how and why it's right to do population culling, population control. You always have to ask, well, from what and to what? What are you trying to turn me from into? No, unless they tell you that in any division of healthcare, I suggest you express a rebuttal, voice a rebuttal saying, why shouldn't I sue you for representing that I am involved in a conflict that you consider yourself able to resolve, and you're not telling me what it is. Yeah, so on the other hand, I suppose it could have been Gary who would crank up the intensity and stimulating duties